Hey, welcome back to the channel. Hey, I wanted to bring up an issue that uh, I hear a lot about in the running community, and you hear about different running groups, like different track clubs. They talk about uh, we're going to send all of our runners to altitude camp. You hear that a lot, and you hear a lot of talk about training at altitude, and today's video is not really to debate, you know, whether altitude training works or not. I have my own opinions on that. However, I hear a lot of talk about it, and it seems like the people that talk about it talk about the science behind it, and they're kind of like people that measure VO2 max and lactic threshold and just all kinds of stuff. Yet one thing I've never heard anybody talk about when concerning altitude training is probably the most important thing of all is density altitude. Nobody ever talks about it because I know in the aviation community, when you learn how to fly an airplane, that's one of the first things you learn about is density altitude. But I think when especially like elite runners, when they go to, they seek out higher elevation places in hopes of getting some benefit out of it. That's all fine and dandy. I mean, that's great. But I've never really heard anybody mention density altitude. So basically, I guess the question is, what is density altitude? Well, the definition is it's pressure altitude corrected for non-standard air temperature. And basically what that means is we have to have a reference point, and our reference point, whenever we're talking atmospheric science, our reference point is what's called a standard day. And a standard day is if you're at sea level and you measure the barometric pressure, you'll get 29.92 inches of mercury, and the temperature will be 15 degrees centigrade, which is 59 degrees Fahrenheit. And then as you go up in altitude, the temperature will drop at a standard amount. Now that's called a standard atmosphere. Now the question is, how often does a standard atmosphere occur? Hardly ever. Maybe 1% of the time you'll actually have a standard atmosphere. So most of the time, especially in aviation, we have to correct all the time. And I think a lot of runners are just not aware of it, so I'm going to bring the subject to light on this. And basically, density altitude is, just don't take elevation into consideration only. When we correct for non-standard temperatures, that's going to affect how dense the air is, and that's going to really be how we're actually feeling, like when we breathe and our performance. So let's just give two quick examples. I'm going to do a video on this, a better video in the future, and it'll be a lot better. So this is just a quick example. Let's take two cities, Atlanta, Georgia, and Boulder, Colorado. Let's say in Atlanta it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit. In Boulder it's 81 degrees Fahrenheit. The elevation in Atlanta is 1,050 feet. The elevation in Boulder is 5,328 feet. So let's take just two quick examples. So in order to calculate density altitude, in other words, what you actually feel, we need to figure out what the pressure altitude is. And to get the pressure altitude, it's 29.92 minus current barometric pressure times 1,000 plus elevation. Once we get that figure, that's our pressure altitude. And then we figure out our outside air temperature minus the standard temperature, that's in centigrade, multiply by 120, then add that to the pressure altitude. And like I said, I don't have a chalkboard right now to try to explain it without a visual, something to actually see. It's not going to make any sense unless you're a pilot and you already know this, or maybe you studied you studied meteorology in college. You would know about this also. So after we do all the calculations, if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's a 90-degree day, the elevation is 1,050 feet. However, the density altitude is 3,730 feet. In other words, on a standard day, if you were to go up to 3,730 feet, that's what you would feel in Atlanta on a 90-degree day. Now let's go to Boulder, Colorado, where the elevation is 5,328 feet. Let's say it's 81 degrees Fahrenheit. We do all the calculations. Your density altitude in Boulder, Colorado on an 81 degree Fahrenheit day is 8,488 feet. So your body is not feeling like it's at 5,328 feet in Boulder, Colorado on an 81 degree day. It feels like it's at 8,488. So that's just something to keep in mind, concerning, these, especially these elite groups that spend a lot of money and they go to altitude camp. But when they get there, I'm curious, do they even realize if they're calculating density altitude into all their parameters and figuring out what kind of benefit they're getting. So in other words, if you live in Boulder, Colorado, and you're thinking, oh, I need to go to 8,500 feet to train to get some altitude benefit. Well, you don't really have to. All you have to do is wait until it's 81 degrees with a barometric pressure of about 29.52, and you'll feel like you're at 8,500 feet. And oh yeah, one thing that when we hear about barometric pressure, like say you, you tune on the radio and they say the barometric pressure is, let's say, 28.96. Let's say you're in Wichita, Kansas, which is about 1,000 feet elevation. If you were to measure the actual barometric pressure right then, it wouldn't actually be 28.96. However, if you were to dig a hole 1,000 feet into the ground and go all the way to the bottom of the hole where you're even with sea level and then take a reading, then you would read 28.96. So that's what, when they say barometric pressure, just think about digging a hole to sea level. So if you're in Denver, Colorado, you would literally dig a hole 1 mile into the ground and then take a reading, and whatever that reading is, that's your barometric pressure. Because remember, everything is based on a standard atmosphere. That's our reference point. Anyway, there'll be a better video about this later and more visual things to go by. But if any of y'all have questions and you want me to actually figure out what your actual density altitude is for where you're at, throw me an email at 152runners@gmail.com and I'll be happy to calculate it out for you. Because if you haven't done this, it's a little bit complicated, but it's not hard. Once you do it a couple times, it's pretty easy. All right, so just hope this helped out, and I'll go ahead and close it for today. So like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.